Blonde hair. It is often seen as just a hair color, but it is much more than that in our society. It carries a heavy load of expectations and ideas. These ideas are stereotypes, often limiting and unfair. Society has carefully built these notions about blonde women over many centuries. These notions are not based on any real, inherent truth about individuals. They are powerful fictions, social constructs we are taught to accept. We will see how they have changed and why they continue to impact women today. The image of the blonde is not a natural phenomenon. It is manufactured. Throughout history, different cultures have assigned specific meanings to blonde hair. These meanings frequently served particular social agendas or even political aims. They were used to categorize women, to exert control, or to sell products effectively. From the ancient world to the silver screens of modern cinema, the figure of the blonde has been constantly shaped and reshaped. She has been a symbol of the other, of untouched purity, of hidden danger, or of supposed foolishness. But these are merely masks, imposed upon real, diverse women. It is absolutely crucial that we look behind these superficial masks. We must recognize and understand the powerful social forces that are at play. The immense power of these blonde stereotypes lies in their seeming invisibility. They become so deeply ingrained in our shared culture that we often accept them as normal, as truth. It is fundamentally about how society creates and perpetuates stereotypes about women in general. The blonde stereotype serves as a very potent and clear example of this pervasive process. By carefully understanding its complicated origins, we can clearly see how other beauty myths are similarly constructed. Our journey into the world of blonde stereotypes begins in ancient Rome. In this dominant and influential empire, most people had naturally dark hair. Blonde hair was therefore quite unusual and often associated with people from foreign lands. Specifically, it was strongly linked to the Germanic and Gallic peoples from the northern regions. These were often tribes with whom Rome was frequently at war or had already conquered. So in this context, blonde hair could clearly signify the other, the outsider, even the barbarian. Some Roman women, interestingly, desired blonde hair, using wigs made from the hair of captive slaves. This desire demonstrated a fascination with what was considered exotic, but also a clear sense of Roman superiority. The inherent foreignness of blonde hair was its first significant social marker in Western history. This initial association with foreignness soon took on a more negative turn. In the complex social structure of Roman society, blonde hair became increasingly linked with prostitution. Many sex workers at the time were enslaved individuals, often captured from these northern blonde-haired tribes. Laws were eventually passed that actually required prostitutes to dye their hair blonde or to wear blonde wigs. This was a calculated method to visually mark them, to clearly separate them from respectable Roman matrons. Blonde hair was thus deliberately transformed into a public symbol of shame and sexual availability. It was a clear and undeniable attempt to control women's sexuality through their physical appearance. This early, harsh branding had long-lasting and incredibly damaging consequences for how blonde women were perceived for centuries. The Roman view of blonde hair was not entirely simple, but the connection to the outsider and the debased was very strong. It is true that some wealthy Roman women might adopt blonde wigs purely as a fashion statement. This highlighted the complex and often deeply contradictory nature of societal beauty standards. The same attribute could be viewed as both highly desirable and profoundly degrading, depending on social context and class. The appropriation of blonde hair by elite women did not, however, erase its negative connotations for other, less powerful women. Instead, it starkly emphasized how beauty ideals can be easily manipulated and controlled by existing power structures. The core idea persisted. Blonde hair was not inherently Roman, and therefore not inherently virtuous by their prevailing standards. It was a characteristic to be carefully managed, controlled, or sometimes exoticized for its difference. These ancient ideas and associations did not simply vanish with the eventual fall of the Roman Empire. Instead, they slowly seeped into the evolving cultural consciousness of the European continent. As societies transformed and developed through the Middle Ages, perceptions of blonde hair began to subtly shift once more. The Roman link to foreignness and prostitution was not entirely forgotten by the populace. However, new interpretations and complex symbolisms started to emerge around this particular hair color. The ongoing story of blonde hair became significantly more intricate, more filled with contradictions. It would soon come to embody both the sacred and the profane, representing both purity and dangerous allure. This growing duality would effectively set the stage for later, more modern, and equally problematic stereotypes. During the medieval and Renaissance periods, blonde hair acquired a new, often strikingly contradictory symbolism. On one hand, it became closely associated with concepts of purity, inherent virtue, and the divine. Consider the common depictions of angels and saints in religious paintings from these significant eras. Many artistic representations of the Virgin Mary, for example, consistently showed her with flowing golden hair. This light, bright color was widely seen as heavenly, seemingly untouched by any earthly darkness or sin. Noble women and idealized heroines in the literature and art of the time were also frequently portrayed as blonde. This deliberately linked blonde hair to high social status, innocence, and spiritual grace. It was a stark and noticeable contrast to some of the earlier, more negative Roman associations. Yet, simultaneously, the shadow of seduction and potential danger also clung tenaciously to blonde hair. Alongside the image of the pure, innocent maiden, there existed the alluring, dangerous temptress. Biblical figures like Eve or mythical beings such as sirens were sometimes depicted with captivating blonde locks. This strongly suggested that blonde hair could also be a powerful tool of dangerous enchantment and ruin. It could lure unsuspecting men to their moral downfall, becoming a potent symbol of worldly temptation. This inherent duality was both confusing and incredibly powerful in shaping perceptions. A woman's blonde hair could signify her as either an angelic figure or a demonic force. The interpretation often depended heavily on her perceived behavior or her established social standing within the community. Centuries later, the 20th century and the rise of Hollywood massively amplified one particular side of this duality. The burgeoning film industry actively created and popularized the blonde, bombshell stereotype. Actresses such as Jean Harlow, the iconic Marilyn Monroe, and the bold Mae West became global cultural icons. Their striking platinum blonde hair was an absolutely key manufactured part of their public image. This carefully crafted image emphasized overt sexuality, undeniable glamour, and often a supposed lack of intelligence. The dumb blonde joke became a pervasive and widely accepted cultural trope during this era. Hollywood sold this particular image relentlessly, making it seem both highly desirable yet also faintly ridiculous. It was a potent and commercially successful mix of surface allure and supposed intellectual harmlessness. The Hollywood blonde was a meticulously constructed fantasy, specifically designed for widespread mass consumption. It effectively reduced complex women to a very narrow and limiting set of characteristics. She was presented as beautiful, sexually available, but crucially, not intellectually threatening to men. This pervasive stereotype conveniently served the interests of a predominantly male-dominated industry and broader society. It provided an easy, readily digestible image of femininity that was both enticing and seemingly controllable. Real women with blonde hair found themselves constantly measured against this impossible, entirely artificial ideal. The bombshell image often overshadowed all their other qualities, severely limiting how they were seen and treated. The historical dualism of purity and seduction was largely replaced by a singular, more limiting, and highly sexualized image. These deeply ingrained stereotypes about blonde women unfortunately persist even in the 21st century. They have very deep historical roots. Centuries of accumulated historical associations are not easily or quickly erased from our collective cultural mind. From ancient Roman perceptions of outsiders to Hollywood's incredibly powerful and pervasive imagery, these ideas have been constantly reinforced. This constant, widespread exposure makes the stereotypes seem normal, almost natural, even if they are actually untrue. They're not based on any inherent biological truth about people who happen to have blonde hair. There is absolutely no scientific basis or evidence linking a person's hair color to their intelligence, personality traits, or moral character. These are learned associations, deliberately created and actively maintained by dominant cultural narratives over time. The stubborn persistence of these particular stereotypes clearly shows the immense power of social conditioning. It demonstrates how easily we, as a society, tend to accept simplistic labels that categorize and often diminish individuals. We can see that they were often created to serve specific interests or to reflect the societal biases of a particular time.